So this week on the Ask the Pastor is going to be Will Collins. Will, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, happy to do
You
it.
know, usually we have Jeremy, but Jeremy's about to go on a mission trip. So
usually you have Jeremy. This week you'll settle for Will.
yeah, second best.
That's right.
So we'll just jump right in it.
Yeah.
Question one is, I gave, my son's in college. I asked him to shoot out to some of the
Sure.
college guys, and this one is they didn't want their name, so it'd be anonymous. So It says, how do you find rest in college?
Yeah. Well, there are a few different answers, I think, to that. A few different ways I could take it. The tricky part about that question is like there are people, both secular and Christian, that have written whole books about that, done whole sermon series. So to kind of say, here's a stamp, one size fits all, is hard to pull off. But I would say some important considerations to make when thinking through how to find rest in college. And also, I would say too, I'm going to answer it in two ways. One, how to find physical rest, and also spiritual rest. I think they kind of go hand in hand, but I also know from talking to college students, they struggle with both sometimes. And so I'll start with rest in Jesus, spiritual rest, I would say. We say around here at Capstone that Jesus is better than anything this world has to offer. And I would say that one of the surest ways to find rest in Jesus is to continually remind ourselves of that. I think that a lot of times when we feel unrest, there are probably two leading factors that I see the most in that. One being identity, which you and I talked about a while ago. It's trying to find our worth or our identity in something other than the gospel. And that causes restlessness. It causes anxiety, stress, a whole host of things because we weren't made to find our identity in any of these other things. And so if we can look and say, no, here's who I am in Christ, not because of anything I've done or accomplished, but because of what Christ has done for me, then I can step into whether it's school, whether it's work, whatever, I can step into those situations knowing like, hey, my standing before God doesn't rely on this. And it gives us freedom of rest, but also security. And I think also it equips us to be able to probably participate better in those areas because we can do it in a way that's God honoring without thinking like, gosh, everything hangs in the balance on this one thing, right? But then I would also say outside of identity, the other thing, I just met with a guy this morning about this. The other thing is going through pain and suffering, whether it's you yourself or a family member or a friend. I think that can cause us to struggle with resting in Jesus. And I think, again, reminding ourselves of the gospel, just who Jesus is, helps with that. Like reading the gospels. I always tell college students, like, continue to read your Bible, but if you're in a rut and if you're like, I'm burnt out, I'm whatever, like just go to the Gospels, pick a gospel and read it, and read it and think through like, who is Jesus? What's he doing in this situation? How's he responding? And if we're struggling to rest in Jesus because of pain or suffering or whatever it may be, I think looking at, for instance, like Jesus, whenever he responds to Mary and Martha at the death of Lazarus, you have one instance where a sister comes and she's kind of the stoic religious sister and is like, he's dead. Jesus says he's going to raise again. And she says, of course he will. I'm a good Jewish woman. I believe he's going to raise again. And Jesus says, I'm paraphrasing, like, no, I'm the resurrection. Like, it's going to come through me. You can rest in the fact that all that's bad is going to come untrue because of who I am and what I'm going to do. And then Jesus goes on, and the next sister doesn't have the stoic religious response. She's pretty upset. And she's like, if you were here, this would have happened. And Jesus doesn't rebuke her. He comforts her. He goes in and he sees everybody weeping and he weeps. He sees everybody mourning and he weeps. And that's in that instance, I think Jesus shows like he sees the brokenness of this world and he relates to it. He understands it. He feels it because it's not supposed to be this way. And ultimately, he's going to do something about it at the cross. And, Jesus says, come to me all who are gentle and lowly, and I'll give you, or come to me all who are heavy laden, who are burdened, and I'll give you rest because I, Jesus, am gentle and lowly. And I mean, I think those words and who Jesus is offer rest for those that are struggling with pain and suffering, whether themselves or somewhere else. So, yeah, I mean, I think identity and doubts connected to kind of pain and suffering, those kinds of things. I think the answer to both is just continue to look at who Jesus is and what he's done. That's the spiritual. The physical, I would say, we need to define what rest is. Rest probably isn't just sitting on the couch doom scrolling, rest. We should come away from rest refreshed. And so rest could mean sleeping in. It could mean, it could mean popping popcorn and watching a movie with your roommate or your friend. Like, do those things. But it should be something that's refreshing and that recenters you and helps you, helps direct you to the Lord. So it could be going for a hike. It could be going hunting. It could, rest doesn't have to mean we're just lounging around doing things. And I think a lot of times college students in particular feel drained. They feel exhausted because they do have pressure on them for the classes they're taking, the course load they have, the degree they're pursuing. But then whenever they have time to rest, they're really not resting appropriately. They're scrolling Instagram, TikTok, whatever. It's draining. Look, there's so many studies out now that it's just not good for us. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. Like, I was supposed to book a flight yesterday. I forgot to do it. My wife brings it up last night when we're in bed. She had sent me the flights. I was like, yeah, let me see the flights. I get my phone. I look at the flights she sent me, didn't book them. Start scrolling through Instagram this morning. She's like, well, which flight did you get? I was like, oh, I didn't get it yet. So this isn't the three fingers point back at me, right? But I do think being able to establish what does rest look like? What is actual rest? It should be something that refreshes us and recenters us in our relationship with God, and then helps us go. Also, Bob, you got to, students and non-students, part of rest is an understanding that you've been working. It's good to rest, but God gives the Sabbath. He doesn't give 7 days of Sabbath or 6 days of Sabbath and a day of rest. Like, we should be working hard. We should be studying hard. We should be using the opportunities and the gifts that the Lord has given us in a way that probably is tiring to a degree because we're working hard at it. And then we should also say, and we're building into our lives time with God, time to sleep, time to hang out with friends, to be refreshed, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I heard Tim Tebow say one time that he wants to get to heaven tired.
Yeah.
He can rest when he's up there. I mean, he talks about of course he wants to take, rest, for his body.
Sure.
But, he don't want to be just sitting down playing video games all day. And
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great, that's something I would ask a college student that came to me, or I have, whenever they're burnt out, they're exhausted, and I kind of ask, like, what does your day look like? What does your week look like? And really, the more we dig into it, a lot of time there is more time for rest than they realize. It's just been filled with, like you said, video games, doom scrolling, what have you. And so I think kind of creating this balance of what does it look like to be intentionally working and intentionally resting, and knowing the two go hand in hand is going to help with that.
So I think also with, when you mentioned Sabbath, I think we take that, as, I don't need to work, physical job, but I can go home and play video games all day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I'm as guilty as anybody of that. Like, look, to me, an ideal off day is like, maybe I go fish, maybe I go on a walk with my family, do some things, and then I watch The Office for 5 hours, and that's great. I'm a fan of The Office. I love doing that. And we need to be doing things that are providing rest spiritually and physically for us. Like, the Sabbath, this idea of rest, is designed both for physical recovery and to make sure we're dependent on God to provide. It's a day where we say, my work and my life and all these things are important, and I'm dependent on God for all of these things. So therefore, I can take a day, or I can take an afternoon, right? Whatever. We don't have to be legalistic about it, right? But I can take time to rest and trust that God will provide. God has given me 24 hours in a day to accomplish things, to rest these things. It makes us not play God ourselves. So yeah, I think it's good.
So, well, the next question is, how important is it to marry a Christian?
Yeah, I think it's real important. Well, I think the Bible pretty much tells us to. Paul, well, in the Old Testament, you have this idea of marriage within the people of God. It can be taken to some unhealthy extremes now in New Testament understanding, but I do think that in the New Testament, Paul takes this idea of being unequally yoked and uses that, teaches that you shouldn't be unequally yoked with non-believers. I think this applies to marriage. I think that there is, as is the case with all things in the Christian faith and in the Christian life, I think there is a spiritual thrust or emphasis for it. And I also think there's some very practical repercussions and steps. So spiritually speaking, I mean, marriage is designed by God. And we see, right, in Genesis that it's not good for man to be alone. And so God created woman, and man is to leave his father and mother and be united to the woman. They become one flesh. Well, Paul says in Ephesians 5, he kind of takes this and says, remember when this was said back at the very beginning of the first book of the Bible. And then he kind of says, like, this is mysterious. Like, this is a great mystery. But it's pointing to the gospel. It's pointing to Christ and his union with the church. And so there's a sense where marriage is created by God and ultimately is supposed to be representative of the gospel, which is that Jesus has united with the church. Ephesians 5, I mean, you know this passage, we talk about it here a lot whenever Paul's going through kind of what marriage should look like. And he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved you and gave himself for you. He's saying, like, husbands, the best to love your wife is to represent what it looks like to be in relationship with Christ, and also to die to yourself for her as Christ died for the church. And so there are all these gospel ties to what marriage is and all these biblical ties. So clearly the idea is that Christian marriage, that is a Christian and a Christian, is the biblical standard. And on the practical side, I would just say, you know, the Bible says time and time again to raise your children in fear of the Lord, to have a household in which the Lord is feared, the Lord is worshiped, the Lord is revered, that Scripture is a part of conversations, that the gospel is a part of conversations. And it's hard, if not impossible, to do that if the husband and the wife aren't Christians, right? So I think from a practical standpoint, there are just so many things that you want to instill in a household, with or without children, from a Christian worldview that just aren't going to happen if the spouses aren't both Christians, you know? It's going to be hard to establish this is who we are, this is how we live, this is who we worship, fear, those types of things, if both aren't Christian. So I do think there's the biblical side that says, no, this is what marriage is, and this is how it is to happen and what it represents. And then the practical side is, well, yeah, of course. If the call of the Christian is for all of one's life to revolve around who Christ is and what he's done for us, and then to witness to others and show that to others, then of course it makes sense for the husband and the wife to both be Christians and agree on this. If not, it's going to be really hard to pull that off.
So would you say for like the middle school or that's just dating,
Yeah.
would you say that they should just reach out to Christian girls or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I would, but I also would say I know people that hasn't been the case. Like some of our best friends that I know, they were here for a while. They don't live here anymore. They started dating before one of them became a Christian. The other one was over time. He becomes a Christian. Now they're married. Their marriage is super healthy. It's great. I would say they're, an exception to the rule. Like I hear those stories, but the language I use a lot with college students, with middle schoolers, when anybody's like, we don't do missionary dating, like our goal is not, well, they're not a Christian, but I'm going to date them so I can be the one to show them Christ.
Yeah.
Like that's just not healthy. It's not a good practice. Could it work? Sure. But, there are lots of things that could work that still don't make a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
I've been in a relationship before years and years and years ago with someone that, this one was tricky. Like, they were a professing Christian, but, our walk with Jesus at the time looked very different. I was really trying to grow in my walk, and that wasn't really it wasn't really reciprocated on the other end. And I was told the same thing by now I shouldn't say I probably still am pretty stubborn, right? And it took me a while and multiple people saying like, hey, this isn't a good move. But as was the case with you, so is the case with me. Like we learn from our mistakes, hopefully by the grace of God and the work of the Spirit. And then when we are talking to a middle schooler or a college student, we can say, hey, this isn't a good move because here's what the Bible says, and here are the mistakes I've made and how you can kind of avoid having to go through some of that. So, yeah.
And one of the best advice that I got when I was here recently when being married is by Daryl Mims.
Yeah.
He made the comment that pray with your wife.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about that. And so I've started praying with my wife, and my marriage has gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like what we talk about, that it's hard to cheat on your wife when you got to go pray with her.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. And it's hard to, it's hard to keep things from your wife. It's hard to be emotionally detached from your wife. Like there's a whole list of things that it's hard to do if you're praying with her. If you're saying like, hey, come, let's talk to God together. Like that's a big thing, it's an important thing. And hopefully if done properly and understood properly, it should flow into everything else.
And I've gone a step further, and people that are going to get married, I said, why don't you just start now? Start now praying with her.
Sure.
That way it's going to be a lot easier when you get married.
Sure.
And,
it's great.
Because I had a pastor when we our first church said, put Jesus first. And he had like a triangle. Yeah. And then everything, but we got married. We didn't do that. We just it took a while to learn. But once you learn it, it's like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Wow. I see why those people were telling me to do these things.
So this is what the Bible meant.
Yeah.
So this question comes from my son James.
Okay.
He's like, we were talking about getting mentoring, and he's like, if I want to get mentored from a guy, how would I ask, and what would that look like to be mentored by him?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think that you have to a degree, get over the nerves and just ask. I think there are plenty of well-equipped people within Capstone Church, speaking specifically for college students here, but I think this probably applies broadly to a lot of places. I would say if there's someone you have in mind that's like, I would really like to be mentored by them, you just ask them. I think maybe saying like, hey, will you disciple me? Will you mentor me? Is the right first step. Now, I do think unfortunately, that there are a lot of people that are well equipped to do that, but probably weren't discipled or mentored themselves when they were younger and have no idea what that should look like. And so they would probably be pretty intimidated by it. They would probably be pretty standoffish on wanting to do that. We have tried at Capstone to remove some of those barriers within the college ministry through offering so many different touch points for discipleship. And so, for instance, we have community groups that meet during the week, which is a form of discipleship. It's not a one-on-one thing, but it's a form of that, of discipleship. We also have what we call Adopt a College Student, which is where families sign up, college students sign up, we pair them together. The idea being that you can have a home away from home while in college. And that one, they're all practical, but that one I think is really helpful, because what I tell the families or the adults who sign up for it is like, we are not expecting you to walk them through the book of Ezekiel. I mean, you can, I guess, but we're not expecting you to do that. What we are expecting you to do is like have them over for dinner once every other month. Send them your kids' rec league schedule. If you're running to the store to grab diapers for your kid, call them up and say, "Hey, I got to run to the store. You want to run up there with me, and let's just catch up and chat." And what's happening in all of those moments is discipleship. Like, it is the male or female student getting to see what it looks like to be an adult walking with Jesus in the normal everyday things. And so we have that. And then I've paired, I don't even know the number, a lot of college students up to do one-on-one discipleship, whether that's with me, whether it's with another staff member, whether it's with just another person from the church. And those are always, the first domino to fall on that is always someone coming and saying, "Look, we had a girl this past spring that came to me right at the end of the semester and said, 'Hey, I think I would really like to have someone disciple me in a one-on-one setting.'" And she told me what her major, like I asked her what her major was, kind of where she's from. And I try to be really intentional with then finding people in the church that maybe are working in that field or are from that state or that area, and creating these connection points. But yeah, I think the first step is just to ask me, ask the adult you want to disciple you, and then go from there. I would hope they wouldn't say no, yeah. But let's say they do, then just come to me or go to Bradley or go to whoever and just say like, "Hey, I really want someone to disciple me. I asked somebody, they weren't able to do it for whatever reason. Could you help me find somebody?" Yeah, I think it's super important.
So pretty much they would just ask, they could ask the college kids just questions and how,
Yeah, I mean, I think what it looks like, I think it varies. Like I'll just use some of my experience. I won't talk for other people, but like I've met with college students where we are going through a book of the Bible. I've also met with college students where I say, "Hey, for the next 5 weeks, let's just get together, catch up on life, talk through what's going on in your world." Usually that's because they have a big decision to make, or they're really struggling with a specific sin, or something's happened to them or in their family. And we just want to use that time to kind of talk about life, talk about the gospel, catch up. Yeah, so I mean, it looks different. It's different based on who's leading it, kind of what the need is of that person. I'm kind of hesitant to have a sticker to slap on that says this is what it looks like, because I think it can be done well in a lot of different ways. That's what we see with Jesus, right? He teaches large crowds, then he talks to the 12, then he has the 3, James, John, and Peter, that he takes over to the side and talks to intentionally. And we see Jesus teaching the large crowds. We see him talking to the disciples, but what is not recorded as much, it is some, but not as much, is the times they're walking from village to village, and they're eating together, and they're sitting around a campfire, and they're maybe cracking jokes, they're talking about what they bought at the market that day. Like, I don't know, there is just a human nature to discipleship that I would imagine definitely had to have happened with Jesus and his disciples. It's just not recorded in the scripture. I mean, they were together for 3 years, and we have small snippets of what those 3 years looked like. So yeah, it varies, but there are lots of ways to do it.
So for the older guys,
Mm-hmm.
and we wanted to say that we wanted to mentor a college, we just walk up and ask them, or would they come to you?
Yeah, I think probably let me know, only because I'm then able to kind of know, well, here are some college students that I know are looking for this. Here are some good connection points. I mean, I don't have to be the one that facilitates any of that. I just feel like I have a decent pulse on what's going on with the college students and who's looking for someone to mentor them, whatnot. I kind of try to always keep a stockpile, if you will, of like, here are some guys and some women who I know are capable and are willing. Also, here's some that I know are capable that maybe aren't as willing right now, but could do this, that I want to encourage in that. And then here's students I can kind of facilitate them with. And so, yeah, I think come chat with me would be my advice, and we'll. I don't imagine a scenario where an adult comes to me and says, I'm wanting to decide with somebody, assuming that they can and should, right? Like, I mean, I won't get into the weeds, but there are situations where I'd probably say, like, well, I think you should be discipled first, But assuming that an adult can and should and is able to decide, well, I can't imagine a scenario where they come to me and say, hey, I have time in my schedule. I want to decide with somebody. And I respond with, well, we don't have students that need that. Like, that's just not going to happen. We have plenty of students that are eager to be discipled by adults. And so, yeah, I would say come chat with me about it.
All right. So last question is, if you could go back to your younger self, what would you tell
man, Bob, don't be an idiot would be the first one, but then beyond that, I think I would want to develop a broader understanding of the gospel in my life. I think early on in my walk with Jesus, I grew pretty quickly. I shouldn't say that. That sounds bad. It's not that I grew quickly. It's I just consumed a ton of. I was working for a nonprofit. I was on the road a lot. I was able to listen to podcasts. I was able to listen to sermons. I had time to read. I had time to talk with people. And so I took in a lot. But I really don't know that I was doing a ton with it. And I didn't do a great job of seeing how the gospel connects to all of my life. It was kind of this thing that I knew, and I was kind of retaining and growing this wealth of knowledge on. And it had obviously like transformed my heart, but I didn't quite know. One was I just was early in my walk, but two, I didn't quite have the language or understanding of like, well, how does the gospel specifically affect how you work, how you interact with people, how you go about your day-to-day life doing the mundane things. Like I think probably almost compartmentalized the gospel. It's not that I was ashamed of it, but I just thought like, I want to store up this information. I want to learn, which is great. You should do that. And in that, you should be thinking through, now, what are the connection points to everything and everyone within me and around me? And so I would say developing a more robust and broad understanding of the gospel. And so like an example of that, I think, would be work. That's something that I really have regrets over. When I first started to grow in the gospel, I was working for this nonprofit, and I don't think I was necessarily like, it didn't make me lazier or anything, but just really didn't see the connection between like the gospel and my work. So much so that I would even go to people discipling me and mentoring me and be like, I just don't know like if what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I want to be doing something that's gospel centric. I want to be doing something that's like ministry related, or where I'm getting to every day be digging into the word and these things, which is great. And look, I'm doing that now, but I wish at the time I had a better understanding of how the gospel shapes our work, what we do, we say it here a lot, but Christians should be the hardest working people there are. Jeremy says a lot. People should be the hardest working people there are because they don't work for man, but their work is unto the Lord. Well, that's true. And I wish that as a guy in my early to mid 20s, I had a better understanding of that, but also a better understanding of just like work's a good thing. Work is a God ordained thing. Work is presented in Genesis before sin enters the picture. So Adam is given work to do in the garden, name the creatures, keep the land, before sin enters the picture. Work predates sin. So work's not a result of sin. It's the like laborious, backbreaking nature of work that comes from sin. Work's not a bad thing. Work is a good thing. And really work to a degree is something that will continue on. Like I think in the new heavens and new earth, we'll have things we're doing. It won't be breaking our backs. We won't be sweating profusely in the June heat, as we're cutting yards or as we're doing whatever. But there'll still be things we're doing. Like we'll still be active because those are good things. They were around before sin entered the picture. And so whether it's working for a nonprofit doing fundraising, whether it's cutting yards or making podcasts or whatever, like the gospel says something about that because you were designed to work. You were created first and foremost for a relationship with God, but also for work. I wish I had a better understanding of that early on. I think I would have probably been a better employee and a better worker in my jobs before coming on into a ministry position if I had have had a more well-rounded biblical understanding of what work was. So yeah, I would say those kind of go hand in hand. But those are the two things that I think I would have known better, and that I try to teach our students as they're getting ready to go out into the world and work and have jobs and hopefully have families and do these things. The last thing I'll say, if I've got time, is I wish I would have known the need for the gospel to be taken to the nations more fully early on, and I did. I through moving to Tuscaloosa, getting connected at Capstone, even before I was on staff, began to get a picture and a vision of that. But we talked earlier in the other episode about kind of going and how transformative that is. And I think I wish early on I would have had a better idea of what that looked like and the need of the gospel to be taken to the ends of the earth, and also the opportunity we have to do it. Paul wasn't hopping in airplanes. When we read in the New Testament about the gospel being spread, to an extent, it was done through everyday, ordinary interactions. And then when it was going through pretty painstaking efforts. And through the advancement of modern technologies and through the kind of socio-political advancements of the Western world and stuff, like that's just not really the case for us anymore. We can pretty easily get a passport, hop on an airplane, go to places that don't have access to the gospel. And so I wish I would have known earlier on the importance of that to better utilize opportunities I had as a young man to do those things. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have a kid. I had a flexible job. So I think all of those things, if I could turn back time, as the, old theological song goes, those would probably be the things I would lean into. And but you can't. You live and learn. And so now I think I kind of take those as now I have the opportunity to have conversations like this and also to teach students those things. So
I'm with you on the missions going out.
Yeah.
Because our church, we talked about missions, but that's all we did. We talked about it. We'd go on a few local, go help at a church. But we never went overseas or anything.
Yeah.
I wish, and me about to turn 50, I wish I could have, I could go back and do a lot more. But
well, it's easy to get caught up too in just our day-to-day Tuscaloosa, Alabama lives, which I love living here. It's great. And we don't always feel the the weight of the need. We're going about our days, we're doing our thing, and but there are so many areas in the world where unless someone comes from somewhere else and shares the gospel and raises up leaders and those things, they're not going to hear the gospel. And we're commanded to go, to be a part of going in the scriptures, but also like what a privilege it is we get to do that. I think of Paul's words in 2 Corinthians, right? 2 Corinthians 5, where he's talking about how we're ambassadors for Christ. Just like what an honor, like how cool, really, for lack of a better word, that God not only sees fit to save us from our sin and from ourselves, really, but also says, and now I want you, Will, who can't get out of his own way half the time, to represent me to the ends of the earth, to be able to take part in what's going on around the world and what's going to go on around the world until the time that Jesus returns. I think it's what an incredible privilege. I also think I would go back, or not go back, but write Brad Paisley letters to me style, would be see it as a great privilege and opportunity, not this like, oh gosh, if I'm not doing this, am I okay? Am I doing the right thing? Like, man, there's such freedom in the identity thing we talked about earlier, but also in saying like, God has called you to do this. He's equipped you to do this, and you get to do this. Like, this is really cool. We have opportunities to do that other people don't, and so lean into that and take advantage of that, I think. Yeah.
Are you talking about going? I remember the first time I went to Kenya. It was in July.
Yeah.
And I do full time.
Probably not too hot over there in July.
No. And I do full time lawn care.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't know if I could go, Lord, because I got a business I got to run.
Sure.
But he's like, last year in May, you went to Disney World and you made that work.
Right.
Why can't you make this work?
Yeah.
And it's like a slap in the face. Like,
yeah.
Okay, you're right. He's like,
sure.
You don't think I can control everything?
Yeah.
And when you come back, everything will be fine.
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay, Lord, you're right. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But
I think about that a lot too. Of like, Tolly has the saying, "People do what they want to do."
Yes.
And so I think that's true, man. I do think that, like, and I'm pro. Look, Bob, if it makes you feel any better, we went to Disney World this past March. Like, loved it. It was a blast. But there is a difference in like going around the world at Epcot and going to the other side of the world. Like we've got to create margin in our lives for these things, and a lot of that comes down to like, what do we value and what do we see as the most important thing? There's nothing wrong with going on vacation. We're going to pack up in about a month and go to the beach with my family. We do it every summer. We look forward to it every year. It's a blast. There's nothing wrong with that. And we also want to make sure we're creating margin in our lives, whether it's in, the vacation days that Paula needs to be building at work, or how we schedule our things to say, well, these are good things, but they're not ultimate things. And so we want to also make sure we are prioritizing and creating space for ultimate things, being gospel-centered work, gospel-centered ministry, and going with the good news of the gospel, particularly to places that are in unreached, unengaged parts of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like, in my younger days, I would have liked to go on to those, kind of like you and Will went on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and Matthew, my bad. Went on the one that, y'all had to hike and.
Yeah. And it's
I mean, it don't sound fun, but.
Yeah, it's great. It's good. I always say that sometimes, I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but like when we go to North Africa, for instance, it makes me a better student of my Bible, because so much of their lives look more similar to the lives of the people in the Bible than ours do in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Like I'll see things there that people are doing or eating or saying or wearing, and then I'll read about it in the Old and New Testament. I'm like, oh yeah, that I get that, or just their worldview, you know. And I really think that the first, like, if we can get more people to just take that step right into that world. You talked about it with Kenya, right? You were like, you went to Kenya and it kind of opened your eyes to that work and that need.
To me, I don't know about that part of Africa you went.
Mm-hmm,
I know here, their faith is a lot different than mine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they depend on him a lot harder and more than I do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, where we go, it's Muslim majority, and it's, you know, we've got a church on every corner here in Tuscaloosa, and where we go there, they have a mosque on every corner, and you're hearing the call to prayer 5 times a day, and you're surrounded by the reminder of the fact that people need to know the good news of Jesus. He can kind of get lost on us here a little bit because we're so used to it, and our Bible Belt, Tuscaloosa world, is so more or less inundated with the gospel and with the church and these things in some good ways and in some bad. And then you go somewhere like that and it's a reminder that, like, you know, no, there are places and people that desperately need the gospel. And unless people are willing to go and share the gospel with them, they're not going to hear it. They're not going to receive it. So, yeah.
All right. So there again, thank you for...
Yeah, I would do it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Till next time, boys, stay in the stands.